Psychiatrists of Reddit, what was the most obvious attempt to fake insanity you've seen? Psychologist. Not psychiatrist. But I used to work at the VA as a trauma psychologist. My job had nothing to do with whether people got service connected. That was an entirely different process. That said, a small minority of people thought if they could trick me into doxing them with PTSD, they would be rolling in dough. They would not have been. The most blatant version of this was someone who had clearly found the DSM criteria online and tried to parrot it back to me without knowing at all what the symptoms meant. At one point this person told me they have hypervigilance. Hypervigilance. When I asked them to give me an example, they looked like a deer in the headlights. I want to stress how small a minority of people this was. Most people I worked with, one really did have PTSD, two were extremely distressed by it and had it affecting their lives immensely, and three wouldn't actually file for service connection because they didn't think they deserved it. I think veterans get a lot of flack for filing spurious claims for service connection. But on my side it was a very small minority who were trying to pull one over on people. Most of these men and women just wanted to feel better. A resident's face fell quite dramatically when I informed them the attention in ad doesn't mean you like attention. Not a psychiatrist, but a secretary for a pish ward at a VA hospital as a college student, who was also trained to be part of the takedown team. That is, when a patient gets unruly and non-compliant, we are sent in to safely get them restrained. One day I came into work expecting it to be a normal day. I immediately hear the code over the comm system for the takedown team to come to room 3. Room 3 is the intake room and where all new patients are seen. We arrive in the room to assess the situation and there are feces spread on the walls and a man rubbing it all over his chest, completely naked. We managed to get him restrained without too much hassle, and we are all covered in feces at this point due to him fighting us at first. We get done and him restrained, and the doctor on the team asks him, "Why did you feel the need to rub feces all over?" His response, "I'm homeless. The USGovt won't take care of me, and I want food and a place to stay. The shelters are full, and I knew that I could get at least 72 hours of warmth and food by acting crazy." We gave the man a full 2-week treatment stay instead, and had the VA and AV come in to get him housing. Literally one of the best patients I've dealt with while working there from that point forward, even helping to calm other vets down on the floor before we had to do a takedown. It's absolutely atrocious that these veterans feel the only way they can get the help they need is to do something this extreme. Last I heard the guy was doing much better. Dav helped him get a job doing cleanup at construction sites and an apartment of his own. Edit. Forgot to add. The doctor could tell this man wasn't likely to be insane. All of his answers to questions and tests came back normal. That's when he went to rubbing feces all over because he knew without something extreme we'd have to release him. Had a mother come in and insist that her child had Silver Russell syndrome. You can go red on it. It's not that easy to fake, as it's a bunch of metabolic conditions mixed with congenital abnormalities. The kid was small, but not that small, around 6th percentile. He didn't weigh much, 5th percentile. All of this, with a right arm length 2 centimeters more than the left side, were borderline criteria for Silver Russell. Did genetic testing, which came back negative, but 30% of cases are negative. So the deciding factor was one of the soft criteria of hyperglycemia. Once she heard about this, she printed out 30-40 articles on the disease. She came back with the kid in a coma. But when the kid was in the hospital, he was never hyperglycemic. He went home and came back in a coma a few weeks later. Again, as soon as he was eating normally at the hospital, he was never hyperglycemic. She starved her child into comas repeatedly for the diagnosis of Silver Russell. She was also a bargain. People who live off welfare and make a game out of it. By the way, she was in a wheelchair when at the hospital. Once I had enough of her bullcrap and walked into the room after only knocking once. She was walking around normally and jumped into the wheelchair as soon as she saw me. I believe it was for money, since in Canada, Quebec, you get money when your child has a genetic disability. If it was legal, I would have slapped some sense into that BTCH. Did a psych placement as a student and was in a discharge meeting with this homeless guy. He was brought into the hospital because police had been called as he was threatening to jump off a bridge. He claimed depression and suicidal thoughts, which it was found out not to be. So he said he was hearing voices, which was also not true. Dude was just desperate to have shelter and food. Sad case. Read The Psychopath Test by John Ronson. It mentions a real example of someone like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They pretend to be a psychopath to get an easy ride. But that's the method a psychopath. Not a psychiatrist, but I'm a psychiatric nurse. We used to have so many malingering inpatients. Homeless. Come in suicidal. Would not get out of bed for days except meals. No participation. Denied suicidal ideation for days. Doc then tries to kick them out. All of a sudden screaming about being suicidal and hearing voices. Rinse repeat x 100. We literally had people with 50 plus inpatient visits. Revolving door. Psych nurse back in the 90s. Multiple personality disorder was all the rage and not true. I would regularly treat people, some of whom claimed 100 plus personalities. Lol. Sorry for tangent, but has anyone else heard someone say my friend was diagnosed as clinically insane? I used to hear it all the time in high school. It was trendy. I remember talking to a guy in my year about how I thought I might have bipolar, and he was like, don't joke about that stuff. I'm literally clinically insane. Sometimes I go stand in the square in the middle of the city and just scream at the sky. I had a lady who loved attention. She thought she was crazy and had dissociative identity disorder. Think the movie Split. Actually, now that I think about it, I saw her around the time that movie came out. She claimed to have many different personalities. One of them where she regresses into a 10-year-old boy named Billy. Anyways, this lady started screaming, tantruming, throwing herself on the floor. Nurses were trying to control her without giving too much attention and feeding into it. She then saw the medical student and the patient told him, tell Dr. Macaroni and Sneeze that Billy is out now. She said this incredibly clear and concise, not in a whining 10-year-old tone she was switching in and out of. The nightmare when you actually have problems and people just think you are lying. I know this will get buried now. I'm way too late. But I have psychosomatic blindness. I'm partially sighted in my right eye, blind in my left. I've had a guide dog and use a long cane everywhere. The amount of people trying to fake blindness for benefits is just unbelievably way too high. And I unfortunately got the tail end of that frustration among the ophthalmologist treating me. I've been laughed at, mocked, asked whether I wanted to see my children grow up. My husband left his job in October 2018, and it was one of the worst Christmases ever. You try explain to a 4-year-old why Father Christmas can come this year, even though yes he has been perfect and Santa does love him so. The guilt that rebounded onto me from that, and the trauma of losing my sight meant by that April I was on suicide watch, and under a crisis team. That was a year ago now. When I was 14 I'm 28 now. I was abducted, tortured and raped for over 4 hours by 2 brothers at a Halloween party I was way too young to be at, but had insisted on going to. I suppressed everything that was done to me so much that I developed my psychosomatic condition. I've been seeing a psychotherapist twice a week since my crisis and have come a long way, but being treated like a criminal, like some kind of fraudster, when your life is just ducked, it hurt a lot, and I don't think I'll ever heal from it. I still have family members who think I'm lying because they can't understand my diagnosis. For a while I told people I'd had an eye stroke in my sleep, but now when people ask I tell them the filtered down truth, because I'm the walking poster child on why you shouldn't bottle things up. Not a psychiatrist, but Trisha Paytas' attempt to fake dissociative identity disorder should definitely be up there. Not a psychiatrist, but genuinely insane when unmedicated. I think where people go wrong faking madness is how big they go with it. I have bipolar, and during mania I come across basically the same as always. Bit more energy, much more interest in sex, drugs, being awake. I think the government have my flat bugged and someone invisible keeps breathing into my ear. But other than that, we good, let's do shots. Insanity rarely looks like it does in movies. I worked as an on-call crisis worker in a community hospital, responding mostly to work calls. A chronic patient with a borderline personality disorder diagnosis presented with behavior that did not warrant an inpatient hospitalization, despite wanting it. When I was getting his discharge instructions together, he left the exam room he was in and found a cleaning cart and sipped some cleaning solution. I walked into the room and I could smell it and asked what the smell was, and he very nonchalantly pointed to the cart and said he didn't know what it was. He drank something off the cart. I think he swished and spit it out, but he got his wish. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell for more Reddit content.